History is full of big changes. But where do these changes come from? They often start with radical thinkers. These are people who challenge the usual way of seeing the world. They give us fresh perspectives. They push us to think differently. Radical thinking is important in all parts of life. From philosophy to politics to technology, new ideas drive progress. Think about it. How boring would the world be if everyone just accepted things as they are? We need people who question, who imagine, and who dare to be different. These radical thinkers might not always be right, but their willingness to challenge the status quo is what makes real change possible. They are the ones who push humanity forward. Immanuel Kant was a philosopher who lived in the 18th century. He was a real radical thinker. Kant believed in the power of reason. He thought everyone had the ability to think for themselves and figure out what's right and wrong. One of his big ideas was the categorical imperative. This sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It basically means you should only do things that you would be okay with everyone else doing. For example, imagine if everyone lied all the time. It would be chaos. So according to Kant, lying is wrong. Kant's ideas about reason and ethics are still relevant today. We talk a lot about justice and fairness in the modern world. Kant's work reminds us that these concepts aren't just abstract ideas. They are rooted in our ability to think rationally and act morally. Kant's ideas continue to influence debates on human rights and international law. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century and talk about Antonio Gramsci. He was an Italian Marxist thinker. Gramsci spent a lot of time in prison under Mussolini's fascist regime. While he was locked up, he wrote a lot about power. He came up with the idea of hegemony. Hegemony is how the powerful people in society stay in control. Gramsci argued that it's not just about force or money. It's also about controlling ideas and beliefs. The ruling class, he said, uses culture, media, and education to make people accept their way of thinking. Gramsci's ideas are super relevant today. Think about how social media shapes our opinions or how advertising influences our choices. Gramsci helps us understand how power works in subtle ways. You might not think of the military as a hotbed of radical thinking, but guess what? It needs to be. In a world that's constantly changing, armed forces can't just rely on old strategies. They need to adapt. The US Navy gets this. They've been trying to encourage disruptive thinking within their ranks. This means challenging assumptions and coming up with new ways of doing things. During World War II, a group of officers called the Bomber Mafia completely changed how air power was used. They were radical thinkers who weren't afraid to go against the grain. Today, the Navy has programs to encourage innovation. They want their sailors to be creative problem solvers. But it's not always easy. Sometimes there's resistance to new ideas. The Navy's efforts show that even the most traditional institutions need to embrace radical thinking to stay ahead. In a world facing complex challenges like climate change and technological disruption, we need innovative solutions. And those solutions will only come from people who dare to think differently.